They've experienced the highest of highs and now the lowest of lows, as the Andira Football Club comes to terms with the death of one of its premiership players. 18-year-old Ross Kimberlin was behind the wheel of a Holden Commodore utility on Echuca Marupna Road when he lost control of the vehicle and hit a tree about 9 p.m. He died at the scene.
It was a single vehicle, no other occupants, no other persons that were involved. So it's going to be difficult for us to actually piece together what's transpired and why the cars left the road.
Just 5 days ago, Ross wore number 49 for Andira in its grand final clash with Nagambie at Marupna. He showed his tenacity by chasing down an opponent in this passage of play. Commentators described it as a match-winning tackle. He joined his teammates on the dais to receive his premiership medal.
I've spoken to a number of the players, probably 30 or 40 of them over the last 12 hours, and look, if we could give back all of our premiership medallions to our little mate back, we absolutely would.
Members of the premiership winning Andira Football Club gathered at a teammate's house last night as they try and come to terms with the loss of their teammate and friend. Ross leaves behind his parents, Kevin and Alana, and his sister Abby.
You wouldn't meet a more respectful young man. Clean cut, just didn't do a step wrong. Any father would be just proud to have him as a son.
But the small town of Andira now only has memories of another life tragically cut short. Michelle Zidauer, Win News.
Thank you. The young bloke you saw there, he was my son Ross. On Saturday, he was on top of the world. On Wednesday, the 23rd, I'm at home and the CFA pager alerted me to an MVA with possible person trapped. It was just down the road. I got a bit of a sick feeling in my stomach. Ross, my son, was at his girlfriend's. For tea, it was only 10 to 9, so it was a bit early. Doesn't usually get home till 9:30. I told my wife I was going to the accident, and I could see the worry appear in her eyes. I jumped in the ute, drove to the station. The fire truck pulled out just in front of me, so I followed it down the road. It looked bad. There's a tree on the car, and I can't make out any details. As I walk towards the car, it's white, and I'm running. I get up close and it's a ute. I still can't tell. The blue lights are flashing, the red lights are flashing, and I'm just not sure, and I'm hoping it's someone else's son. I put my hand into the tray and I could feel the toolbox. I'd bought him a big black toolbox for his tools, and there it was. I look up, there's a local copper standing by the door, and he says, "I'm sorry, Kevin." I push past him, and there's Ross, and he's dead. I could hear this terrible noise, and after a bit, I realised that it was me. I was actually making that noise. It just couldn't be true. I'm not sure how long I stayed at the accident. I put my head in the window, I put my arm around Ross, and I told him I loved him. I have to go home and tell my family. I can't let a stranger do this. I've been to 14 fatalities in 20 years with the Andira CFA, and I know a grieving family is a terrible thing to see. So I make the drive alone. Abby, my eldest daughter, she's worried, so she's standing out the front. She's been texting Ross's girlfriend. They've been trying to ring Ross. I got out of the car and I told her Ross was dead. And I guess I was more focused on telling his mum. And I walked off. She dropped to the ground screaming. I turned back, tried to pick her up. Alana, my wife, and Holly, my other daughter, came running out. I tell them Ross is dead, and we're all huddled together on the ground. Holly hasn't heard and wants to know why we're not going to the hospital to see Ross. And I tell her again, the only rush is a nightmare. Ross was 18 years old and 9 months when he died. As a kid growing up, he loved the farm, tractors, four-wheelers, but hated dairy cows with a passion. The first thing some people noticed about Ross was his smile. He played footy for Mooroopna. There wasn't a sport he wouldn't try. And he was always fixing stuff, mostly stuff he'd broken the day before. He certainly wasn't perfect. At 14, he jumped into a Water Commission bulldozer and drove it round while we were milking. I stood with Ross and the irate supervisor, surveying where Ross had driven, and noted to the supervisor that he'd shifted more dirt and to a higher standard than their regular crew, and that they should leave the keys in so he could finish it off. As a young adult, his life was good. First year of senior football, and he wins a premiership. He knocked back a uni place to take what he thinks is the greatest job in the world, an apprentice electrician. He had a beautiful long-term girlfriend, Gabby, rode motorbikes in the hills with his mates, water skiing on the river with his family, and more friends than I can remember names for. Ross wasn't drunk, and he wasn't on drugs. There was no one else involved in his accident. I've got a lot of dates and times here of when he went to sleep and when he didn't. I think the point is he was probably only getting 5 hours sleep a night. On Tuesday night, he was in bed by 10 o'clock. Wednesday, the day he died, he was up to work at 6 o'clock. After work, he'd gone around to Gabby's for tea. He was falling asleep on the couch. He told Gabby he was tired and wanted an early night. She told him to stay. When he said he'd sleep better in his own bed, she offered to drive home with him. And he said, "No, I'll be right. It's only a 30-minute drive." So on a straight stretch of road, in good weather conditions, Ross fell asleep, doing about 100 k's. He drifted off the road, he hit a tree, he died on impact or shortly after. He broke his legs, his hips, his neck, had massive head and brain trauma. Catastrophic was how the coroner repeatedly described it to me. I couldn't believe he fell asleep. I was sure he'd had a good night's sleep. As I thought over the few weeks before he died, the whole final series had been turmoil. Training flat out, every game on Saturday was a must-win, keeping up his social life and working. He had told me that before some games he hadn't been able to sleep. When his phone account came, even the night I thought he got a good night's sleep, there were calls at all hours. The thing with driving tired is you can't tell how tired you'll be in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Most people believe that you only fall asleep on a long drive. The accidents around Adira that have involved fatigue have all been short trips. Ross had had plenty of driving hours leading up to his licence, way over the 120. He'd driven around the farm on the ute, motorbikes and tractors since he was 10. Coming up to getting his licence, he was always telling me about some old car or some old bomb that he could do up. He was even milking cows to save for this car. Ross didn't know, but his mum and I were saving for his car as well. I didn't want him to drive an old bomb. We lent him the money for what we thought was a safe car, had ABS, airbags, traction control. The airbags in Ross's accident didn't even deploy. I admire the blokes you've seen speak tonight, the cops, the ambos, the crash rescue workers, because they can make a real difference to you. The reality is you live in a country area and sometimes they are a long way away and you need to rely on other people. Passers-by, it's my sad experience that a lot of them will stop 10 metres away and phone for help. There's a braver set that will move to 5 metres, they'll phone for help and they'll yell to you, "Are you all right?" Sometimes you may get someone like me, CFA volunteer. That is if I'm not working, or I'm not down the paddock, or I haven't had a few beers. I've turned out to car accidents, about a third of those, the Undira CFA is just a little tin shed brigade on the side of the road that you drive past without noticing. About a third of the accidents, we're the first there. There's only a couple in our brigade that will step up and try to help. Check your airways, try to stop bleeding. We have a first aid kit like you'd find in most common bathrooms. We don't have any pain relief. Mostly what we'll do is reassure you that the ambulance will be here soon. I've had 3 attempts at CPR, and I'm numb from 3. I know that's not a great record. CPR is not like you see on the it's not like you see on the telly where some doctor gives a couple of breaths and some urgent chest compressions and the patient returns to life. In reality, there's blood, spit, broken teeth and vomit. At Ross's accident, as I stood shattered and broken, not one member from my brigade came within inside that 10 metres. I've seen up close young people die from fatigue, drunk driving, talking on the phone, speed and stupidity. One thing that amazes me is the little monuments that appear on the side of the road. Ross has one such monument, and friends and family go there to remember their loved one, and they tell me how peaceful it is. There is nothing peaceful at an accident. It is a place of horrendous violence, torn steel, broken bodies, shattered glass and fear, but never ever peace. Next time you sit in the driver's seat, shut your eyes and imagine what those last 2 seconds will be like. I don't have the words to describe what losing Ross is like or how you deal with it as a family. I know I have had black thoughts since he died, and I feel cheated out of something really, really wonderful, and I'll carry that with me for the rest of my life. I had hoped to leave here and leave a life lesson for you that may save you on the road. And I thought about it and I realised I actually didn't have one. I couldn't give Ross one and I couldn't save Ross. So I asked people I knew who were smart and caring, and they looked at me with a blank face. The reality is the things that will kill you on the road are as individual as you. But the one thing they all have in common is they start with a bad choice. It hurts me to say Ross made a bad choice, and it did kill him. When it comes time for you to make your choices, whether to drive or not, I hope the little voice inside your head reminds you of something you saw or heard here tonight. There are no such thing as car accidents, just young people's shitty choices. Thank you.